Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. Enterprise Bank and Trust was founded by entrepreneurs with the core focus of serving privately owned small and medium-sized businesses who have a story to tell. Enterprise Bank's commitment is to listen, learn, and guide clients to a lifetime of financial success. Enterprise Bank, together, there's no stopping you. I'm Joel Goldberg, coming to you from the Kansas City Audiovisual Studios. They create engaging spaces. Check them out at kcav.com. I love on this podcast to talk, and it's not every single episode, always talking to people that are in leadership roles or in roles that they can inspire others. Sometimes it's just their story that does that. But a lot of entrepreneurs, I visit with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I love that because there's just a certain grind and survival element and a work ethic, dreams and passions to entrepreneurs. And my guest certainly falls under that category today. And then he really has a adult lifetime of playing in the entrepreneurship world. So my guest today is a man that really believes that we all have a dream and a purpose, my kind of guy. And he really lives for helping people live more passionate, impactful lives. He believes that a lasting impact begins and ends with personal growth. And he has certainly lived all of that. So on top of living in a world of creation and execution of successful business, he's a coach, he's a teacher, he's a speaker, and he's got his hands in a lot of entrepreneurial ventures. And we'll talk about all that right now with my guest, Isaac Collins, who I feel like I've known a long time, but we've just sort of, crossed paths here and there and bumped into each other. And then, over time got to know your story a little bit. And to label Isaac as just the owner of a yogurt shop, per se, would be just a small portion of what he did, what he does. He is the owner of numerous Yogurtinis in Kansas City and much, much, much more. Isaac, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well. I'm so glad to be here with you. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing well, and it's good to visit with you. And I think I'm describing this accurately. Like, sometimes you get out and you play the networking game, which I know you do, I do here in town, and whatever town that you're in or you're listening to. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a leader, there's a good chance that you have that circle of people in your networking world. And so I felt like you and I were always crossing paths, and I knew a lot about you, and I think you knew a lot about me in the way that you sort of see stuff on LinkedIn and mutual people. And then I came to find out that you do a lot of things. You're involved in a lot. So tell me about all the ventures, because you're tough to pin down on one of them.
Yeah. Well, Joel, I imagine you get this quite a bit, but I've known about you way longer than you knew about me. But yeah, like you said, we've just been kind of crossing paths and been in the same network, but never really officially met. And I was honored to be able to have conversations with you and meet you this past year. I feel like 2020 was the year of meeting a lot of big names in Kansas City that I otherwise felt came out of nowhere, but they were always here, but their voices got elevated this past year. And that was really, really cool. But, like you described, I'm a local Kansas City kid, born, and I like to say somewhat raised here because we moved away at a young age, but we were close enough where we spent a lot of time here, and got raised by two hustler parents who instilled the entrepreneurship in me at a young age. And that stayed with me throughout my years, and always want to own my own business, and was lucky to be able to start out at the age of 22. Didn't think it was going to happen until I was way older, but I've been pretty blessed.
And I want to talk a lot about your background growing up and your childhood and the influence of your parents, because they just themselves have a fascinating story that I know really helped shape you in, to me, a way that should one day turn itself into a book or a movie or something like that, because it's a really, really fascinating background that had you guys moving and really turned out to be a very good, positive story. So I'll get to that in a moment, but tell me about the entrepreneurial ventures. And I know that there's a lot with yogurt, and there's some with yoga, and there's the health world, and were you sort of always built that way to dabble in a lot of things and try different, because it's not easy. I know that.
Yeah, I don't even really know where that portion came from as far as trying a little bit here and a little bit there. I've just been lucky to have had a lot of interest over years. And for me, and you get this, you have an entrepreneurial spirit as well. And a lot of entrepreneurs have this, where if we have an interest, we think that we need to turn everything we have a passion for into a business. And I don't know if that's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, but that's kind of been my journey. If I've liked something, I'm like, let's see if we can, do more of this and monetize this. Oh, I like this. Let's monetize this. So, I'm 32 now. I got started when I was 22, about 9.5 years into this. And I started out owning a Rocky Mountain chocolate factory in small town Iowa, a town called Conroy, about 30 minutes west of Iowa City. And it has about 75 people in it. Well, it happened to be close to this outlet mall called Tanger, and that's where my Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory was, sat right on I-80, so it was a travel location. I did that for 3 years. It was an interesting experience. It really got me a lot of experience because I was your traditional bust your butt, spend 80, 90 hours working for about 3 years. Decided that I wanted a little more quality of life with my business, and decided to use some of the profits, and wanted to come back to Kansas City, where it was home. And that's when I bought my first Yogurtini, 2015. 2016, ended up selling that Rocky Mountain, focused on my efforts in Kansas City. 2017, I started a nonprofit teaching trauma-informed yoga to inner city kids called Superhero Yoga, which we still do to this day, and it's grown pretty good amount. End of 2017, started another business, which I think we'll get into later, with 2 partners, called Serve Nutrition. 2018, launched my second and third locations for Yogurtini, but the third one didn't come to fruition until this past summer, where my wife and I are blessed to own 3 Yogurtinis around the metro. And then now in 2021, I'm in the process of launching an official coaching and speaking business. And I say that because I've been doing it pro bono for some years, and I decided last year it's time to get paid. So here we are.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that in a moment too, because I think that there's, and for a guy like me that started to monetize speaking, and there's such an interesting process to that, because when you've done something for free for a long time and you suddenly understand that it has a value to it, that includes monetary value, that's a tricky and tough, sort of a tightrope to walk, because you don't really know exactly what that monetary value is, and you've got to convince yourself and others. So I do want to go there, but I want to get back to the food and the health part of this.
Sure.
What drew you from the beginning? I don't know if the food part of chocolate was the health side of it, but you do seem to live in both of those worlds a lot in terms of food, in terms of nutrition / health. Sometimes they're in the same boat, sometimes they're not. But was that something you always thought you'd be drawn to?
Not really. When I first got into it, the way I got into Rocky Mountain in the beginning is because my college, Missouri Western, had an entrepreneurial partnership with our benefactor and the Rocky Mountain Chocolate Corporate, where they were trying to help graduating seniors and alumni get into business. And so just so happened to be the opportunity that was there if I wanted to get into business at such a young age was Rocky Mountain. So I got into it for the opportunity, not the concept. In the process, I ended up falling in love with it because I didn't want to do chocolate forever. I love sweets. I love them to death, but it was just the concept and whatnot, because I am big into health and wellness and fitness because I played sports my whole life, football, track, basketball. I played football in college. And so it was interesting going from eat healthy, get your sleep, work out 5 hours a day, to graduating, not working out anymore, eating chocolate all the time and selling it. And, I actually gained 17 pounds within 3 months of graduating December 2011 because of all the chocolate I was eating. So that was interesting.
So before I go to your background growing up, because I think it completely shaped you. Well, I mean, all of our backgrounds growing up shape us, but I do want to ask about Yogurtini, because one, that's a very, at least from my observation, a tricky business, because one, it can be very seasonal, and two, oh, by the way, we've been dealing with this pandemic thing, which I know is an absolute nightmare for everybody, but certainly for anyone in the service industry, in the food industry. So what drew you to Yogurtini, and how have you managed in this past year with so many challenges?
Yeah. So Yogurtini was, again, just another good opportunity at the time. Being in Iowa, and just, to be honest, being Black in Iowa, living in a small rural town, after 3 years of experiencing what I experienced, it got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. So I told corporate, hey, I got to get out. I really want to go back home. I can't do this Iowa thing anymore. Thank you for the opportunity. Do you have anything else that's in the Kansas City area in chocolate? They looked at it. They said, no one's willing to sell. But we have this other concept that we're just getting going, a frozen yogurt wing of the company. And we have this Yogurtini that is for sale. And I was like, I don't know what that is. They showed me the opportunity. And again, didn't love it, but it allowed me to get out of Iowa and back home to be able to then spread my wings from there. And so I got into it and ended up falling in love with it. I absolutely love this business. And so it was, again, just a good concept and good opportunity for the time.
I'm glad you said that you fell in love with it, because otherwise, if you were still in it and didn't love it, I would worry about you more than the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and a pandemic and everything, the challenges that come with that. Because, unless the money is off the charts ridiculous and then you have no choice to stay in it, it's hard to remain happy and upbeat and energetic when you don't have a passion for it. So I guess my question would be, what did you fall in love with Yogurtini? You're clearly in a different place today than where you were when you started.
Yeah. So I've probably, like any entrepreneur, I've been on this journey of happiness, being super fulfilled at one point, and then kind of hitting the downslope of that and feeling like, why am I doing this? Am I good enough to do this? That natural imposter syndrome that we all fall into. And again, it wasn't the concept that I loved, but doing a franchise and owning this kind of business that was so customer facing and people oriented, that's what I fell in love with. Like, I am a massive extrovert. I love to build community. I love to give back. I love to do life with people and see them every single day. Well, we get an immediate return on what we do. We do a special, we do a brand partnership, we do anything, we get an immediate feedback. We don't have to advertise, and then get the fruition of it weeks, months down the line. We do a brand partnership, or we partner with a nonprofit organization. We see the benefits of that immediately because we are so B2C with what we do. And so I fell in love with the relationship with the community, man. I mean, you know me well enough. Like, I love pouring into the community, and I love getting feedback from the community. I just love people, and it's the ultimate people business that is really kind of similar to a model of a coffee shop, where it's just relationships and people and investing in where you're at. And it's just a really cool concept. That's the part that I fell in love with it.
All right, so that definitely makes sense. Totally fits your personality. Now I want to go back to childhood, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, in my notes, and I know there's much more to the story, your mom eventually became a nurse. Your dad, I believe, a warden, if my notes were correct on that. That was not the case in your younger ages as you guys were fleeing Kansas City, was it?
No. The thing that I love when people are like, hey, how did you turn out how the way that you are? You're this, you're that, you're whatever. Where'd that come from? 100% it's from my parents, their mentality, who they are as people. So a little bit of a backstory. My mom's always like, we should write a book on this. I'm like, well, I'll have to get some tips from Joel on that. But, when I was born, they were into some extracurriculars that they obviously shouldn't have been into. My parents were some of the biggest drug dealers in Kansas City in the 80s. There's actually an edition, October 1988 edition of the Kansas City Star, where my dad and 3 of his buddies are handcuffed face down on the grass because their dope house got busted. And that's a way longer story, but they were just into a lot of things. So when I was born, 1989, my parents had a decision to make. Do we keep living this life that's going to put our child in harm, or do we turn over a new leaf? And so essentially my parents, my grandma, and my aunt, my uncle, and some other people, we all overnight packed up and moved to St. Joe, which is about an hour north, to essentially start fresh. And again, that's the very abridged version. But from them having this mentality of doing what they were doing with those extracurriculars, they had a natural hustler, grind, entrepreneurial, I'm doing finger quotes for those who can't see me, um, passion in them. And so they took the things that they struggled with growing up and in that time and flipped that into their career. So my dad, his passion, he was actually a counselor and worked in the prison system doing that. And then went a substance abuse counselor, then went into being a FUM, a functional unit manager, and then became assistant warden, and then the warden of a prison system where the requirements are a college degree. And he was the first warden to ever become a warden without a college degree because he was so sought after, and the second Black warden in the state of Missouri ever because of his passion. He literally lived it. He understood the inmates, what they were going through. He had a different kind of philosophy. Instead of punish them, his focus was to reform them, create programs to help them out. And my mom took her same passions and struggles, things that she had been through, to help people with nursing. So, man, they're such an inspiration for me. And that's why, I always struggle with this chase for money, because they've instilled purpose and passion and helping people in who I am. And so I'm always on this like teeter-totter of what to focus on.
It's a fascinating story to me too, because one, and not everything plays out like it does in the movies, and there always has to be the extra drama, and you have to sell the story and all of that. But typically, whether it's in the movies or real life, the clean break doesn't happen like that, and it follows you elsewhere, and it's generally not as simple. And I'm not saying it was simple, but as saying, hey, we have a child now and we need to be done with this and we need to do things the right way. I mean, it's an amazing success story, and I pretty sure one that shaped your whole life, even if you don't remember what those extracurriculars looked like. And thankfully you weren't around for that. I mean, they made this clean break. But how much have you thought about that, and how much, as you were growing up and becoming older, were you seeking answers to that? Because this story could have gone a totally different direction.
Yeah, well, there's people in my family where it did go a different direction. And so a cool thing about my story is my parents never hid that from me. I knew growing up things that they have done and been through. They didn't tell me all of the details, because why would you tell a kid that? But I knew where I came from. I didn't have to experience it because they got me out of it, but I know my upbringing. I know my family. I know my culture and some of the not great parts of it. And I didn't have to live it, but they shared it with me. And we actively went back to Kansas City, and they would show me places and things that they did and where it was at and all this kind of stuff. Not to give me the lowdown on, hey, here's where you can do this, but it was an honest account of what happened to them, things that they experienced, how they got there, how those things manifested. And so I had a reason not to get into those things. I think a lot of times with kids, we tell them, hey, don't do this, but we never give the why. And so then they don't have a background of why. I never got into drugs or any of that stuff because I knew the consequences, because I had two people that I loved and respected who laid it out on the table and said, hey, if you do this, this is a possible outcome of your actions. So I love that. That definitely shaped me. And I wouldn't say that I sought a lot of answers, because I was given the answers, and that was really cool. And like I said, I had a lot of other family members that didn't have the benefit, I guess I would say, of having the same upbringing as I did. And I saw how it was the complete opposite.
Yeah. So your parents did everything in their power. It sounds like it became their personal mission to make sure that you were never living in that world, but yet there were still people within the family close enough that it wasn't foreign to you. So you were able to see what the other side looked like too. And I've got to think that, and I believe your first child is on the way soon too. And I'm sure you've thought about that a lot too, because we all think about, what our parents did for us as we become parents. And by the way, you'll think about that for the rest of your life now. But how much have you thought about that with baby number one coming?
Yeah. Well, it just hits different. I mean, baby girl is going to be here in 12 weeks. And I was talking to my wife about this last night, like the amount of focus you put on being a good man and the family unit doesn't just double. I feel like it's tenfold. I'm thinking about things and thinking about the future in a way that I never thought about it before and never thought that I would think about it. And I know you know this, and I'm thinking of like, what do we want to impart on our first child and our future children? And it also makes me understand the sacrifice that not only my parents, but parents in general put forward for their children. And, it's one of those things where I feel like when you're growing up, you love your parents so much, you get in the teen years and you kind of rebel and you push them away. And then you get to a certain age when you're like, oh crap, I didn't realize how much you sacrificed for me. Well, I'm there in a big way now that I'm about to be a parent. I'm like, man, how did they do it?
Yeah, it's a great place to be. And then, you'll spend the next 18, 20 years or the rest of your life watching, your kids start to understand what you've come to understand. And that's a long journey, very much, by the way, in a different way, but very much like being an entrepreneur. It's just such a journey with all the ups and downs and twists and turns. And I don't need to tell you that. You're in for a really fun ride. So let's talk about the other business and now just this desire to help others. And that's not a new thing for you. I know that you've always had that in you. From what I know, but now we talked about monetizing something you've done for free, giving back to community, being out there for kids, being out there for young entrepreneurs that maybe are the next Isaac Lee Collins. Tell me about that and that passion.
Yeah. So when I first got into being a business owner in 2012, like I discussed, I knew that what I was getting into with the chocolate business wasn't something that I absolutely loved, but I found the pieces that I loved. Community, I love people aspect. But what I have loved about what the thing that I did catch in all that is, how can I get into an industry where I feel like I am dealing with people in community every single day, building the relationships, but not just bringing people together, but also adding value to people's lives. And so I got really into personal development and like motivational speeches and that kind of stuff in 2012. My first motivational speaker that I fell in love with was Tony Robbins. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's probably the first one that anyone recognizes and realizes when they first get into that industry. And I fell in love with it because I had spots in my life growing up where everything just wasn't positive. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And it was hard. And sometimes there wasn't always that either positive talk or encouragement. However, in this industry, I loved how there was always an emphasis to be better, an emphasis to chase your dreams, an emphasis to live your purpose. And I loved the feeling that I got from it and the value that I got from it. And I wanted to be able to teach that and impart that on other people, the part of the give back. And I just didn't know what to talk about or do whenever I first caught that love for it at 22 years old when I was brand new into my business. So I just put it on the side for a while. So 8.5, 9 years now, I want to be able to do that. I have a wealth of knowledge. I have 9 years of entrepreneurship and a lot of failures and a lot of learned lessons that I can actually add value to someone's life versus being a 22-year-old punk kid that is going to try to motivate someone to have a better life when I hadn't experienced life yet. So I'm excited just to talk about some of my failures and some of my lessons and also some successes, and hopefully it shortens the learning curve for at least, one person.
And it'll be more than one person, but absolutely. You just want to make that impact I know on your LinkedIn page, it says, I help new and aspiring entrepreneurs overcome fear and doubt so they can plan, launch, and grow their dream business. You've lived every bit of that. You'll still continue to live all of that. And, you just talked about big misses. So let's get to the baseball theme questions brought to you by Kissick Construction. Trusted team, reliable partner. Check them out at kissickco.com. Let's start with the big moment first, the home run. What's the biggest home run of your professional career?
Oh, man. So I would have to say 2018. 2018 was a great year. It was the year that I got married, and it was the year that I had exponential business growth as well. Like I told you before, I was in the process of starting this startup company with some friends. It's called Serve Nutrition. We sold online supplements. And that business was going to come to fruition to launch December 14th, 2018. Well, as we were building up to it in the fall, this opportunity fell into my hands to acquire 2 more Yogurtinis. And I talked to my wife, and we're like, we literally can't pass this up. So we acquired 2 more Yogurtinis in the fall. We launched one November 1st, 2018 in the Shoal Creek area, right outside of Liberty. And then the other one we held on to find a good location, which we just opened in 2012 last summer. And so just 2018 in general, got married and launched 2 businesses within 45 days of each other. It was great.
Yeah, that's on the personal and professional end of things about as good as it gets. How about a swing and a miss? And what did you learn from it?
Oh man, this is a good question. I would say when I think of a swing and a miss, I kind of think of it more of like a swing and a miss topic thing that I faced multiple times and didn't really understand. And I just kept swinging and kept missing around the same thing. And it was not correctly reading the red flags when partnering with people, with different people for businesses. I got into my first business, Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory, with a girlfriend at the time. And everyone told me it was a bad idea. And we even discussed it and said, this is probably a bad idea. And then 4 months in, the relationship ended and I was stranded in Iowa alone. And then I met this guy and we were in the process of potentially partnering on his construction company as well. He already had it up and going. I was going to help him with the back end side, organize the business to be able to get more business. Again, red flags. Everyone said it's a bad idea. I decided to go through with it anyway. A year in, I got burned for $100,000 on this project that we were partnering on here in Kansas City when I moved back here. And then the third one was Serve Nutrition. And that was not because my partners were bad. They were actually really great guys, very knowledgeable in business. But we decided to get into an industry that we didn't all the way understand. We took supplements, so we thought that we were knowledgeable to launch it, but we didn't understand the industry as a whole. Just because we took it didn't mean we really understood it. Also, we did not understand the online ecosystem at that point because they hadn't launched a business yet, and I was doing brick and mortar. And so red flags all around, and it took me a long time to learn that. Hopefully I learned it.
Yeah, you learn those lessons from the swings and misses. And then the final question is small ball, the little things that add up to the big things. I say it all the time. The book is Small Ball, Big Results, and you can get it on Amazon here in Kansas City, made in KC, Bliss Books and Wine, or through my website if you want a signed copy, joelgoldbergmedia.com. That's the plug. What is Small Ball to you, Isaac?
Great book, great book. And this is not going to be any surprise based off what I've been talking about, but it's consistently just caring about people, whether they're inside your business or outside your business, like doing it in a genuine way so they know you're not doing it because you're trying to get something out of them or whatever. Like build relationships, build community, give love, give empathy. And getting something needs to be an afterthought. If it comes back to you, awesome. I love the like hypothetical conversation, and I know this has been floating around for years, but it's the CEO talking to the CFO, and the CFO asks the CEO, you know, what happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave? And CEO says to the CFO, what happens if we don't and they stay? And I think that's a perfect thought process in that of we need to invest in our people because that's going to come back 2, 3, 4, 5-fold. But even more than that, if it doesn't come back, it's just the right thing to do. Building people is so rewarding. So that's the small things we can do every single day that make just maximum exponential growth.
I don't think you can ever go wrong with that thought, provided that people don't take advantage of you and all that. But a belief in people is what makes the world go round. Chapter 2 in the book is simply titled People, and it's all about that with some big time major achievers, you know, people with a lot of success in their life that have done so not alone, but with the help of people and great teams and believing in people. So I think you're you're spot on there. And I don't think that we could ever talk about that enough. 4 final questions as we round the bases. The first one, I'll hit a heavier topic because I do, and really, and I think you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I have spent a lot of time over the last year talking about race in America on this podcast. It's not going to come up every time. Had a lot of meaningful panels, starting to speak now with different organizations and leading and moderating some panels for companies on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I've really been, honored to do that, but also learning along the way. And, you talked about being a Black man in rural Iowa, and I can't even imagine what that is like. And I say all the time that even here in Kansas City, there are a lot of times that I may go pre-pandemic to a networking event or a happy hour, and I'll look and I'll have maybe one friend there that's Black. And what I oftentimes now think is, what's it like to walk in those shoes where oftentimes you walk in the room and you're the one that looks different than everyone else. And that's an uphill climb for people every single day of their lives. What was that like in Iowa?
I mean, the spot that I was in, I would go weeks and months without seeing not only another Black person, but anyone of color. If you even Google the the demographics of Iowa, it's like 94 or 98 or something like that percent white. Especially in my area, it was like 99.9. There was just no people of color where I was at in the rural area. I would say my story is a little bit different than a lot of Black America because I grew up in Kansas City. But then when I went to St. Joe, we went from hood of Kansas City to hood of St. Joe. And then when I was in 4th grade, we moved up to north of St. Joe to go to a little better school district. And then I was in an all-white school. So I got years and years and years of being one of 2 Black people in a school of about 800. So I was kind of used to it by the time I got to Iowa, but I wasn't used to getting that kind of racism to me as an adult, as a professional adult. So that was really tough. And I had to learn to blend in. I had to learn to either blend in or just not really be seen. And that was tough from someone who likes to talk and likes to stand out.
Well, you're not able to be yourself, and oftentimes, so that's has to be just such an impossible burden on a regular basis. Just a follow up on that. Did you have a big takeaway? Did you have a lesson learned from the challenges that you dealt with in rural America?
It was easier for me, and I hate to say this, it was easier for me to blend in because sometimes I felt like it was about survival. And if I feel like if you're not Black, that doesn't make sense to you. But if you are, you 100% get it. I ran into some pretty intense times when I was there, where I did feel like my life was threatened several times, whether it was people coming in my business or it was things that were said outside of my apartment and people were yelling for me to come out. Walking up to my business in Iowa and there is a folded up Confederate flag right there where I'm trying to open. I mean, literally we could have a whole podcast about the stories and the experiences that I went through. And coming from, being trained by my parents to be yourself, be your unique, weird self, to going in a situation where I literally couldn't, I realized another level of survival. It doesn't mean, hey, I'm not going to survive if I do this because they will kill me or harm me, but it also just means keeping your mental sanity as well. So, yeah.
I don't know that anyone that is white can fully understand that, but I think that the more we're able to understand it, which is why I like to ask the question, not to every Black guest, not to every guest of color, but I think when it's appropriate and there's a story to tell, there's always a story to tell. But
can I say one thing on that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and sorry to cut you off, but with this past year of Black voices being highlighted and being able to speak on this topic so much more, what I have found that has been the most successful is when our stories of the Black experience on all sides are just genuinely told. Because I grew up in an all-white school, and I had so many of my friends even apologize to me over the past year because they just didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't understand my experience. You know what I mean? And so it was not when I was preaching about how, other people who aren't Black should act. It was when I was just telling my genuine experience, things that I went through in my life, or where people were like, boom, oh my gosh, I had no clue. I didn't realize that those things actually happened. It was like I saw people talk about it on TV, but I've known you for 25 years and you experienced that in a school that I was in, or in a college that I was in, or in a business that I was in. That really changed it for people. And I just love that stories are told and put out there so people can hear those and be affected by them.
It's why in the last year I have become much more comfortable asking the question that often was perceived as being taboo. You can't talk about that.
Yeah.
And so we didn't. I think that's true for white people. I think that's true for people of color. It was just easier. And some of that was, hey, if I've got to blend in and survive, the last thing I'm going to do is start going to educate people on this. And now I think that it takes all of us to bring these stories to light, because the more that people that look like me hear these stories, the more that we can understand and walk in those shoes, not having been in those shoes before. And it just leads to better. We're not going to solve all this overnight. We know that it's been going on since the beginning of time, but we've got to figure out a way to have these discussions and do so in a less awkward way, even if they're painful discussions. And so, so I'm glad you shed light on that. Now I'll completely shift gears. I live in a world of segues on TV where sometimes you got to go from, a heavy topic to a sponsor to a whatever. So I'll just give you the simple one. As a guy that I think is in great shape and takes care of himself really well, I'm very envious of that. I think you still have that sweet tooth. So what's your weakness and how do you navigate it?
As far as sweet tooth goes?
Yeah.
Anything chocolate. Like literally, my wife and our favorite is Ben & Jerry's. And so she knows it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it has different kinds of chocolate in it, I'm good. And I just finished off a whole pint last night of chocolate brownie cookie dough.
Oh,
so good. And then I fell in love with the half-baked. So any kind of frozen dessert, froyo, gelato, custard, ice cream, sorbet, I'm all about it. But it has to be chocolate.
And Yogurtini, of course.
Yeah, and Yogurtini.
Third question as we round the bases, more of a serious business question, but you talk about the fear of launching. And you've done that many times, and now you're advising so many that are following in your footsteps or may follow in your footsteps. What's the key to overcoming that fear? I know it's always going to be there, but what advice do you have?
Man, Joel, that's a good question, because that's why I really want to get into this. I see, and this isn't a knock on them, but I see way too many business coaches and consultants who have never owned a business before. And so there's certain pain points that they just don't understand. And a lot of the personal development, self-help world or coaching consulting world is just telling people to make the leap and take action. That's terrible advice if people aren't equipped to actually be successful. We know that they say, it keeps changing, but like in 5 years, 90% of businesses will fail. And then in 5 more years, 90% of those will fail as well. And I have been in this long enough, almost a decade, to know why that happens. And I think that pushing people just to take action is the wrong thing. The thing that I want to train people is on the proper planning process in the beginning. I've been able to launch 8 businesses now because I, 1, plan properly, 2, know my numbers, 3, know the value of adding value to people, and 4, I take care of myself. As entrepreneurs, we miss that piece. But just taking it back to the planning process, if you are competent in something, you will gain confidence. If you have confidence, you will gain competence. But if you don't know what it looks like or how you're supposed to do it, your confidence is down and you may not ever launch. That's when the imposter syndrome comes up. But if you can properly plan it out, maybe a 5-year plan, or even better, I think a 3-year plan, practicals of what it's going to look like, and get a coach or someone to help you along the process to fill in the gaps where you've never been before, that's when you'll have success, or a greater amount of success. And I want to help people with that. And people don't know their numbers. They don't know the difference between a profit and revenue or cash. They're looking at the bottom line profit number, but not realizing that they're dwindling on cash, and that's why businesses fail, because they run out of money. But they're like, oh, why this profit? That profit number doesn't matter when you're running out of money, and those are two different numbers. So I want to train people on that. I want to help them through this process to be able to launch their dream business with a higher level of success than they would have by just taking action and getting in the game too soon.
I love that. We all have blind spots, by the way, and it usually helps to have someone look, and it's much more obvious to others than it is to us looking in the mirror. The final question will be about Yogurtini, and if people want to find out anything about Isaac's business there, yogurtini.com. And I know that this will have to do with people. You've already talked about that, but opening up a new shop, dealing with a pandemic, I know there's still opportunity. There's been opportunity over this last year, even when it has seemed impossible. So back to a lesson learned, and this will be the walk-off question, but in terms of running a business like that can be seasonal and involves people showing up in person, what have you learned? How have you been able to survive that and maybe make things better or come out on the other end better than where you started?
Sure. It's a good question. So for the ones who don't know me and don't know, we were crazy and we launched another Yogurtini in the height of the pandemic, August 2020. And, I think that people sometimes look at business success like it was magical and oh my gosh, this person's amazing. Business is so formulaic, it's ridiculous. And if you know what the right numbers to look at, then you'll have a greater level of success. So for us, the very first plan you should do before you do a business plan is a feasibility plan. Does this make sense to do? Do the numbers add up? Will we be able to be alive in 5, 10, 15 years? If it is a yes, then you write the business plan to figure out everything else. So we did the feasibility and said, these numbers make sense. Even during the pandemic, we'll be able to get through if we line up A, B, and C, and we lined up and knocked down A, B, and C. So that's the first thing. And then as you're doing the plan, again, do the numbers make sense? And are you going to be able to survive and also serve your customer with a lot of value? And again, we decided that we would be able to do that because we could pivot in a way to still serve people even if they weren't coming in our door through delivery, courier service, etc. And we knew that the pandemic was eventually going to end and we would be able to profit enough and cash flow enough to get through it whenever, this thing was over. And fortunately, we were right. I told my team, you're going to think I'm either a genius or I'm crazy. And I'm leaning a little more towards the genius right now, but we're not out of this thing. We'll see how it goes. So I think those are the things that people need to worry about and look at. And again, we're a people business. If you serve the heck out of people, you have a greater chance of being successful.
If people walk out happy with a good experience, they will come back. It's as simple as that. And by the way, in 2020 and beyond, people wanted to be taken care of more than they've ever been taken care of before because it involved just some level of connectivity. And there's so much loneliness out there and isolation. And so when you have something that is there for you, they won't forget. They really won't. Doesn't mean that you're safe forever with it, but it means that you've made those inroads and people want to trust. They want to be able to count on someone. And so I know you're doing that in so many different ways. Yogurtini.com. And then for all of Isaac's other ventures too, you can find him on social media. I think it's generally at Isaac Lee Collins for Instagram, Twitter, and stuff like that, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So that's really easy for anyone that wants to track down Isaac at Isaac Lee Collins. As for me, you can find me at Goldberg KC on Twitter, at Joel Goldberg KC on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. I'm out there, and my website is joelgoldbergmedia.com. Shout out to my sponsors, Kansas City Audio Visual, Kissick Construction, and Enterprise Bank and Trust. Businesses often come to Enterprise Bank because they demand and frankly are worthy of more than the status quo and need a local partner who understands their business. Isaac, I knew this would be great. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for all the inspiration, the advice to so many young entrepreneurs and older ones for that matter out there too. Best of luck, continued success, more and most importantly, best of luck and congrats with the baby too.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me.
All right, great to visit with Isaac Lee Collins. Good to spend some time with Isaac. Again, I'm Joel Goldberg and hope to catch you next time on Rounding the Bases.